Good day, good life to my listeners. Today we're going to explore the journey of the carbon papers 2. In the journey, we're going to select 2 of the most important things that one could apply to one's life. In the journey, be like tools, like a carpenter with his hammer, like a tailor with his needle. We're going to use obedience and understanding. Obedience to what? To the laws of life. Understanding comes after the obedience. In understanding the laws of life, we find that in the structure of life, there is a mineral known as carbon. There is oxygen and there is hydrogen. That is known as the CHO arrangement. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Without these 3 players, there could be no life expression. This is chemistry. This is biochemistry. In the past 300 years, we have been listening, reading to things about things such as vitamins, protein, enzymes. Yet I found that very few people knows what these things are and what role they play in the human body. You know, it is like giving someone a toy and telling them that Santa Claus brought this toy. That's not the truth. So when we accept protein, vitamins, and enzymes as players in this life procession, then we are prepared to accept melanin. Remember what we said, and this could be investigated, that carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are the main players in not only supporting life, but in the manifestation of life. You see, everything that is constructed by the universe, creation, or God, has the structure of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And it is starch-less. Whatever substance that is created by the universe is starch-less. We said melanin. Why? We use the word melanin because for the last 40 years, melanin is the buzzword in relating to health and nutrition or life itself, especially when it is referred to black people. Most black people tells me that melanin is what makes them black. There is nothing on the planet that is blacker than carbon. There is nothing on the planet that plays such an important role like carbon. Melanin appears nowhere. But again, we accepted vitamins, enzymes, and protein. Well, why not accept melanin? In the carbon papers, things would be clear. Things would be afforded to you in a way that it would be very clear to balance it against another whatever perspective. Clarity is what affords us sight. So in the carbon papers, we find that melanin, as alluded to by many, as being such an important mineral, or, yes, mineral or substance. Some says it is a neurochemical substance. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am not a student of medicine, or neither am I a student of philosophy. Everything that I have done is based on life arrangement. Every word, every decision, every act has to complement life procession. In my understanding of life, melanin doesn't appear anywhere. But I am told, or I was told by some of the people that promotes it and write about it, I asked the young lady if melanin is such an important substance, would it be intelligent for me to ask, where is it produced? Where do you find it in the human body? Oh, of course, very intelligently she said, in the neurons of the central nerve system. I was really surprised. I have never been to school, whether kindergarten or college. This lady has a doctorate degree in probably neuropathology, in psychology, in whatever else. Making this statement so easy that it is produced in the neuron of the brain, of the nerve, then one has to question, what is it that science has afforded us? Because this statement is grossly inconsistent. The nervous system produces nothing. The nervous system is a conduit. It conveys resonance from the brain to each organ, to each system, to each cell. Without the brain, the heart would never beat. It is the electricity from the brain that afford the heart to pulsate. In turn, the heart supplies the brain with oxygen via the blood. The lungs purifies it. The central nerve system is to convey that resonance to point B. It produces nothing. Any production of hormones or chemicals in the body is produced by glands. It isn't produced by the central nerve system. The central nerve system is the carrier of resonance. But because we have to accept what the intelligentsia has afforded us, because we have no right to question, that right has been removed from us. When the statement was made in New York by the Usher Research Institute that carrots were a poison, everybody and their grandmother in New York jumped all over me. Of course they had to, because the source of their information was inconsistent with the progression of life. So now we have melanin that we have to deal with. Why? I don't know, because I have never even alluded to melanin. And ladies and gentlemen, the Usher Research Institute has cured AIDS, sickle cell, lupus, herpes, cancer, blindness, diabetes, leukemia, paralysis, and many, many others. Do we consider melanin? Well, all of those who thinks that melanin plays such an important role and have sought it, they wind up walking into our office later on because the energy that they expected to receive from such substance was not forthcoming. The other part of this thing is that those who promote melanin have difficulty in explaining what role does it play beside making you black. Well, the Chinese have little melanin. The Caucasian have little melanin. We have a whole lot. And this is what makes us black. But that is in contradiction with biochemistry. Black is carbon, not melanin. But since they are insisting, I have to ask some more questions. I was in a radio program by Mr. Jawanza in Washington, D.C. recently, and I was asked to share the program with Dr. Lilo Africa. I said, no, I don't think that I would like to do that. And they asked me why. I said, because there will be contradiction and then we're going to confuse the listening audience. And I don't think that I want to do that, because after I read the research of Dr. Lilo Africa, I found that there was inconsistencies in his menu. And I didn't want to be the one to show those things. Well, Jawanza said, he insisted, he called back next day and said, we want you on the program to do precisely what you said exists. I'm embarrassed because I don't want to be the one that they would consider the judge. So Dr. Lilo Africa came on the program and he alluded to melanin. Oh, I said, well, I'm going to have to be very gentle, very understanding, and also compassionate, because I know that this man knows nothing about melanin. I know that to be a fact. How do I know? Listen carefully. As he goes on in his dissertation and he stopped, I said, Dr. Lilo Africa, you alluded to melanin as being the basis of life and color. He said, yes. I said, sir, whenever someone has been depleted of iron, the disease is anemia. And if they are heavily deficient or more deficient, you will come up with leukemia. When I'm suffering with rickets, there's calcium that has to be addressed. Bones have to be addressed with calcium. If my brain, or when my brain is lacking of energy, well, again, we have to look at copper and carbon. But now that you have alluded to melanin, I want to know, when I find myself deficient, and I will, because minerals go through deficiency, absorbed and utilized with energy. You have to replace it, like you have to eat the food to replace iron, you have to eat the food to replace calcium. What foods do I eat to replace melanin? Those foods have been classified. I said, oh God, this is what is afforded to us as doctors. This is the black community. The cell that has been made sick is now submitting to inconsistencies. You know, it is like a woman that have lost her senses. When Dr. Lilo Africa made that statement, I was totally destroyed, because I was hoping that he would have made a statement that was consistent with science, at least, or biology, or biochemistry. I was not too pleased because I want to hear something good. I'm not the only one that is supposed to be out there affording what I'm affording. I want there to be many that I could be at ease with myself because the load is heavy now. He said those foods has been classified. I said, by whom? Because if this food has been classified, we ought to know who classified them. Because we are the one at jeopardy. But no, that was not forthcoming because I knew that the man didn't know what he was talking about. Then I was asked just the following week to go on another program. This time, it is with Mr. Kweku Ando. Oh my God, I didn't want to go on the program. Again, because I know that there are inconsistencies. Dr. Kweku Ando began to accuse me of a whole lot of things. Well, I expected that. Didn't matter because my position is not one that I designed for me, and it is not one that is based in science. It is based on that cosmic arrangement that never fails because it is consistent with life, which I will explain. Dr. Kweku Ando said that I go around telling people that they should not eat carrots and beans. That is the truth. Carrots were made in Holland. They aren't a product of nature or life or God. I am a product of nature and God and life. So therefore my food should be from that same source, not from a machine they call a laboratory. Furthermore, if you have problems with carrots, because I made the statement, there are measures that you could use to know whether the substance is natural or unnatural. If a substance contains starch, rest assured it is unnatural because starch is carbonic acid. It would eat you up. Dr. Kweku Ando, you said to me that cassava is an African product. I said, no, sir. He was angry at me because I made statements in Atlanta, Georgia, where he has his place, his laboratory. I told the people of Atlanta that cassava should not be consumed because it is a product that contains cyanide. Cyanide has the ability to change the images in front of your eyes and also your thinking pattern. But since no one in the health field in or out of Africa has done any research on foods that is being afforded to us. You see, the gorilla cannot eat the polar bear food, nor vice versa. When I asked Dr. Kweku Ando, are you saying that cassava is a natural product? He said, yes, and you were wrong. I said, thank you. I didn't have to say any more because I knew that if my brother, Dr. Ando, had done the research that was necessary to afford himself as a practitioner of health, he would not have made that statement. So, myself, it would have been abusive on my part if I had pursued the dialogue because I already knew that my brother didn't know. The other part of the carbon paper. We, the so-called black people, need to understand that the reason why we are not as pleased with ourselves first and then others is because we have yet to understand those things that were made specifically for this gene group. I said that the human body, being a replica of the universe and life expression, if one organ has been suppressed, the whole body would be sick. The heart, the lungs, the liver, whatever organ. We find today that because of clarity, we see that there is a cell that has been suppressed. That's the cell that I, Dr. Sebi, represent. And it is until this cell or this organ that is a member of the whole human race, not given, but regain the freedom of expression and the freedom of giving, then and only then would peace be experienced internally and externally. Why? Look at history. Look at the example giving. We have been suppressed. And is it by chance that one of us has been selected to bring the healing of the world? But that was what we were always about. That history, that story has not been told. What was happening in the forests of Africa millions and millions of years ago? That story has not been told. But as we begin to do that which the Bible recommends that we do, we will see everything. Honor thy mother and thy father, that thy days may be long on the land. Are we in compliance? The answer is no. Should we feel guilty? The answer is no. We, like everyone else, find ourselves just as angry as the lion, the cheetah, because the diet has been changed. The carbon papers intend to bring clarity and that we will be able to pursue this honoring thy mother and thy father. Ladies and gentlemen, I assure you that the very minute that you embark on such journey, stress and disease would immediately cease. Yes, this is the carbon paper too. Linking with the cosmic procession, not regurgitating words. It is about clarity. We will continue to show natural examples to substantiate our position. In every endeavor of life that one embarks, if that particular giving or endeavor that you're pursuing is one that supports life and addresses health, one has to be very extremely careful as to what you are affording to support this life. It's not like a tailor that cuts into a piece of material to sew a suit, or a shoemaker who will make a pair of shoes. If you make a mistake, the pair of shoes, that's okay. Make another. The tailor could cut the suit too short. Well, you sell it, make another. But in addressing the human body, one has to have the understanding that would aid us in delivering that which is being pursued, health, the cure of disease. It is asked of me, Dr. Sebi, you alluded to understanding and obedience. Would you please elaborate on obedience? Of course. It is necessary. The first time that I was told that I was obedient, I was about 57 years of age. I went to visit a man named Mr. Roger from St. Vincent. He lived in New York. He was 94 years of age then. We talked for about 6 hours about many, many things and beautiful things. The man was born the same month with me. They call us Sagittarius. When I was leaving, going out the door, he said, Dr. Sebi, I want to say this. I have taken your product and I feel good and I enjoyed your conversation, but you know what I got from you? I said, no, sir. You are obedient. I looked at him and I realized it was to be the first time that someone associated me with obedience. And it was a feeling that went through me that I never felt before, because my mother never said that to me, neither my grandmother. And my grandmother is at the center of my life. There's no philosopher, there are no books, there are no teachers, there are no leaders. The only leader and teacher I ever know is my grandmother. I never been to school, kindergarten or otherwise. Now this man has provoked something in me that I would like to say that it was a sensation that was pleasurable. It was more like awareness. And it was frightening, because when he said it, I felt that all my life. But I wanted to be now more so obedient because he said it. I said, thank you, Mr. Roger. Thank you so very much. And I left. Obedient to what? I didn't have to ask Mr. Roger, obedient to what? Because he was a Sagittarius. He was just like me. He knew that I would know what he was talking about. Obedient to the laws of life, to that which is given to you. You know, as a little boy, I never been to school. I remember when my mother lived under the floor of a house, not on the apartment under the second floor or below. No, we lived under the floor in the dirt on burlap sacks. And I look out of the floor when it was raining that day, and I said that one day I was going to heal my mother. She was very sick. Now, why did I say that? I was only 5 years old. But I made a statement that came out of my mouth at that age that I'm living now. What did I do in the journey of life to be afforded that my mother no longer have the pain she used to have, and that I said that when I was 5. When I was 27 in New Orleans, 1960, I'm sitting in a barber chair on Claiborne Avenue with Timothy Cogman. And I said to him that I was going to do something for the black woman of the world. I said, because she's the one that has been disenfranchised, dejected, and rejected by everyone, including us. What that something was going to be, I didn't know. I was a merchant seaman then. Little did I know that I was going to be a healer. At 27, ladies and gentlemen, I was suffering with asthma, diabetes. I was impotent. I was angry. Very extremely angry. Later, I'm to understand in my research that my anger was precipitated because the oxygen that I was being deprived of, being asthmatic, made me neurotic. Had to. I'm being deprived of oxygen to my brain. There is instability. I find myself now affording myself to the world as a healer. And something came over me about 5 years ago and reminded me, but you're not totally in compliance, Dr. Sebi, because you said that you was going to do something for the black woman of the world, and now you're going to have to do that. So what did I do? It was easy for me. I turned it over to the sisters. They are the one that's curing AIDS now and sickle cell and all the other diseases, not me. They learn it, and they're doing it. I felt good. That was easy. Again, obedience showed up when I was working for the county. A steam engineer. The boy didn't go to school. He has a job as a steam engineer in 1970. You would think that he would be holding on to it because the boy is already 37. And he has a job as an engineer, making all that money. And one day, again come another voice. 2, you're going to quit your job and you're going to quit your wife. I quit my wife that I loved so very much, Marilyn Woods, and I quit my job that was the best thing I ever had. Why did I do that? I don't know why. I remember when I left Maryland, I cried. I cried 5 days. And in my crying, I said, well, if you cried, if you left her, why are you crying? Why don't you go back? But the voice inside said, you better not. Obedience to that voice from inside of you is what I'm talking about. But that voice that comes to us is denied because philosophy has taken over. Philosophy? Well, there is Benedict Spinoza on the improvement of the human understanding. When I picked that book up and I opened it, I didn't understand anything in this book. I thought that I was very stupid. Had to. After all, the boy didn't go to school. Benedict Spinoza is a philosopher. But look at his inconsistencies now. He said, on the improvement of the human understanding, how could your understanding be improved when you're eating hogs, potatoes, rice, and beans? So Benedict Spinoza just gave us a half-truth, or half of his thought, I suppose. I mean, I'm helping the man because he's the philosopher. On the improvement of the human understanding, and it is hog, meat that made the cows mad in England. What did they eat? Meat. So when Benedict Spinoza said, talk about the human understanding, he should have explained that meat and carbohydrates would really play havoc on you, and then you need improvement. But to improve it, you had to leave that stuff. That was not forthcoming. So, after all, I wasn't that stupid, isn't it? Mr. Benedict Spinoza. The other one was, even though I never felt that he, Benedict Spinoza, because he was a philosopher, that he was superior to anyone else. Benedict Spinoza afforded himself by nature, no, was afforded to us by nature to do just what an ant does or a crab. He has a duty. His was to talk. Mine is different. Mine is to afford healing. As I turn toward the philosophy of healing, because of the carbon papers, meaning the understanding that comes out of that perspective, I was able to see inconsistencies, not only in the allopathic, such as affording us the chemicals that are inorganic and carcinogenic. Why has this been afforded? Because of disobedience. Again, disobedience. You know what happened when you are disobedient to your parents? You get a little whipping, they call it, with a belt. I never got a whipping in my life. Disobedience to the laws of life, yes. Here it is. The allopathic isolates the active ingredients in the plants and then use that. But God made a plant with 102 minerals. When you isolate one, that's a poison. They call that a protoplasmic poison. The herbalist, oh, he just as guilty. The poor healers in America need help, lots of help. The herbalists and alternative medicine need more help than the physician. Because the healers, the herbalists, are using peppermint, aloe vera, echinacea, golden seal, comfrey, garlic, and all these things are poison. You need help. They need help. They need love. They've been reading books. Life is not a product of a book. So why do we read books expecting to extrapolate from that book substance that is applicable to life? Something is wrong. So when I found that these things were poisonous, I spent and pondered much why things are so clear to me. Is it that I am treading on treacherous ground like Mr. Magoo and I'm totally unaware? Is it that I am insane and I am the... Insanity is something that is real. You could feel you could see a soul, you could feel a pain, but when you are insane, you are the last to know, because the images has changed gradually. I wanted to know if I was insane, because why things are so clear to me and not others? Why is it that I am so easy to change and to drop a previous understanding to something even better that is complementary? Oh, it happened to me. You see, being the little boy that I always am, and I like being that because I get away with things, I'm not serious. I don't have to be serious to know what I'm doing, isn't it? Well, in my embryonic stages of healing, I went to see Mrs. Holloman. Mrs. Holloman said, you know, the salve that you gave me, it made me feel very good. But what am I going to drink now? You said that you're going to afford me the best nutrition there ever been. I said, I want you to drink carrots juice, beets juice, celery juice. She said, hold it. Stop it. I said, yes, ma'am. I'm always obedient. I listen to every one of you. I like to listen. When I listen to you, I learn. She said, you want to be a healer? I said, yes, ma'am. I want to heal everything. She said, but you're not going to do it the way you're going. I said, why, ma'am? She said, because you're affording me things that are artificial. Why, ma'am? She said, you go and research, and you will find that all those things were made. I didn't have to go too far, because when I came to Los Angeles, I don't know why I did this. I never been to school, but I went to the market training institution on the corner of Western and Hollywood Boulevard. Why did I do that? I had never been to school. I hate school. I don't like school. I don't like shoes. But now I'm in school. Why did I enroll in this market school? Did you know that when Mrs. Holloman told me that carrots were artificial, and that these were artificial, it took me straight back. It was a trigger that took me back to MTI, 1963. I learned in MTI that there are 33 varieties of cucumbers. There are 666 varieties of apples. There are about 33 varieties of rice. Potatoes, there are about 12 varieties of potatoes. And that these things could be grown twice a year. Then I begin to take it home. The things that God made produces fruit once a year. Not twice, not thrice. I immediately relinquished that old position because it was easy for me. I started to construct the edifice that I represent today. And did you know that I left Los Angeles in 1980 to come back to Los Angeles in the year 2002, and all of the healers in California are recommending peppermint, carrot juice, garlic, aloe vera. Is it that we get stuck it? We get jammed. We get corralled in a perspective, so much so that it becomes so difficult for us to relinquish the position? Or is it that when they entered the perspective to afford themselves as a healer, they didn't do the homework that was necessary? That is, to understand the cosmic procession. My return to California, Los Angeles, I already heard how people jump all over me, which is okay, because God has afforded me some very big shoulders. I could take on the load. The healers that were practicing the inconsistencies, 22 years later, they're doing the same thing. Ladies and gentlemen, cyanide is affecting our healers. Cyanide is affecting our preachers, our imam, our rabbi. I just had one yesterday. You would think that being a Muslim or being a Christian or being a rabbi in the Jewish faith, that one would be aware of the things that support and sustain life. Because if my religion and my philosophy is incomplete in the givings, then my life has been compromised because of this unawareness. So when the healers of today are told that Dr. Sebi says that carrot juice is bad, the healers, oh, he's just saying that because so and so and so and so and so. That's okay. I can understand that, because when you have been practicing for 20 or 30 plus years and some newcomer on the set tells you that you're not wrapped too tight, now there is antagonism, because you have to recognize that you've been wrong for 30 years. No, you don't have to take that position, that you've been misinformed. You have been misinformed for 30 years. This I find in Los Angeles. Every healer in Los Angeles is guilty of disobedience. The poor preacher, he too is disobedient, because the Bible says that the herbs are for the healing of the nation. But it's not the preacher's fault either. The preacher was unaware that cyanide was changing the images in his vision. The imam, yes, the imam needs help because he still eats lamb and he eats barley. These things are very detrimental. The rabbi, likewise. What is needed today is what most people call a synthesis. But how could this come about? when I said syntheses, because there has to be some collective understanding to stop the violence. Because I remember when I was violent, and that was not precipitated out of me being bad. It was the food that was given to me that made me angry. It is the beef that was given to the cows in England that made them angry. Ladies and gentlemen, we all are stressed. This giving could only be afforded out of the carbon papers, because the carbon papers came out of the path of Onghos. The path of Onghos prevents anyone from making mistakes. Mistakes are not made when one is traveling on the path of Onghos. The path of Onghos is the path that is designed by nature for that individual cell growth. If that path is not followed and obeyed, there would be stress. Like example, I always give, the gorilla was not placed in Alaska. The gorilla was placed in Africa. But if the gorilla thinks that we are all one, like Homo sapiens always say, well, all the gorilla needs to do is to go to Alaska and sit on that piece of ice with the polar bear, and he would not be here pretty soon, isn't it? Likewise, if the gorilla ever make the mistake to eat the food of the polar bear, it would also take him out. And what do you think is happening to us? This is why the whole planet is angry, because one cell has gone astray. They call that what? The white corpuscles is proliferating. Why? Because the white corpuscle detects that the red cell has accepted a bacteria. It has to cleanse it out. But in cleaning the bacteria, it tends to eat the cell itself. So what do? We fix it by taking it back into its cosmic arrangement, into the cosmic balance. We're going to feed the body that mineral that is deficient. And there goes leukemia. The white corpuscle no longer is proliferating. We need healing. I need healing more than any one of you, because I am aware of my elasticity. I'll soon be 70 next year, and all the damage that has been done to me throughout the year that I indulged in eating those things that were acid, they have taken a toll on me, like they are taking a toll on you, my brothers and sisters, friends, and everyone else. Obedience to the laws of life. It is a thing that we have to go into it gradually. This isn't something that we're going to jump off into it immediately. There are steps. But yes, prevent the starch. You begin a good journey. Prevent the uric acid, the carbonic acid, and the lactic acid. Free of those acids, those things that you're pursuing would immediately be given to you, just like they're given to me. Today we're going to take time out to clarify much of the misconceptions and misunderstanding about healing and nutrition. The Usha Research Institute has selected Dr. Sebi, your brother and servant, to come and deliver this message, because there seems to be a little bit of problem with many of us that are looking for health and nutrition. We have visited many philosophies. We have visited the Ayurvedic, the yin-yang, the macrobiotic, the allopathic, and the homeopathic. It seems as though we are running around in circles. So we took time out to clarify that which has been made difficult to understand or complex. Today, our talk, our lecture, and this particular segment is called the Reconnection. Reconnection to what? The reconnection to life. It has now been 400 years since society has been introducing a particular method of healing that have yet to complement us in a way that we would like for it to afford us.
But as we all know, that everything begins and ends with God, the Creator. So one could easily see or understand that if God is the Creator of the universe, then it behooves us to understand those things that are made by God. That seem to be some difficulty for many, because when we believe that the milk of a cow, an animal, is sufficient to afford nutrition to a human body, then one has to question that, because I am not an animal. That's common sense, I think. Animals produces milk for animal babies. Human beings, women, females, produces milk for human babies. But something happened to us that we elect to do just the opposite. Instead of us giving our babies the milk of a female human, we elect and chose to give our children the milk of an animal. I think that if we are to be scientific, intelligent, and lowest on the strata, to use our common sense, is there something wrong with that? And then, to compound the problem, is that the animal that we selected to afford us this milk is an animal that was made through the process of hybridization, an animal that is godless. God did not make a cow. You see why we are titling this subject as the Reconnection? How many of you sitting in the audience understood that or knew that? Well, I suspect that many of you doesn't. Why? Because in 1985, which is approximately 17 years ago, the Usha Research Institute took a position and showed the public of New York on WLIB that carrots are artificial. Because they are artificial, they are unable to deliver the nutrition that one is looking for, because it is hybrid. You see, to understand nutrition, one has to use only those substances that are electrical. And the only substance on this planet that are electrical are the products that came with creation. Carrots didn't. Beets, rice, beans, wheatgrass, wheat. All these things are hybrid, plus much more. So what we are noticing is that there is gross misinformation when it relates to healing and nutrition. Because if in 1985 we didn't know that carrots was artificial, what else exists that we are unaware of? Well, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, there's much more. The Reconnection does not allow for inconsistencies to prevail. For instance, if one is cosmically connected, meaning connected to the dictates of God Almighty, the Creator, one would never allow oneself to indulge in something other than those things that are of creation and Creator. You see, the things that God created, from the milk of a bison to the honey of a bee to the substance of a burdock plant and the kalawala, which is one of the most powerful plants in the world. These plants are electrical, opposed to comfrey, opposed to aloe vera, ginseng, rose hips, and vitamins. You see, the difference is one is electrical, one is non-electrical. And the non-electrical contains what? Starch as a base. So you see, in the Reconnection, we find that we begin to clarify much of the inconsistencies. We go into this little other part that is most unnecessary. In the year of 1985, the USHA Research Institute placed an ad in the Village Voice, the Amsterdam News, and the New York Post that AIDS has been cured by the USHA Research Institute. And we specialize in cures for sickle cell, lupus, herpes, blindness, cancer, insanity, impotence, and others. When the Attorney General saw this ad, he could not, under any circumstances, accept that this ad was representing something that was accomplished. According to him, this could not be true. But what the Attorney General of New York didn't know about those of us who are members of the USHA Research Institute is that we were aware that until that day of September of 1985, we were aware that until that date, September of 1985, there's no record. There are no records showing that someone somewhere on this planet had cured these diseases that before mentioned. So how could the Attorney General, Mr. Robert Abrams of New York, could have believed that this was possible? Now it became a thing of confrontation, which was unnecessary. We said that this is the reconnection, but in the reconnection we find carbon that we have yet to understand or to study carbon. We are told that melanin is what makes pigmentation the color that it is. We have been fed melanin, like we have been fed protein, like we have been fed vitamins and enzymes. These are words that we have yet to dissect and to understand the meaning and their function. Well, in the reconnection, we find that carbon is the determining factor in reference to life. The higher the concentration of carbon, the higher the quality of life. When carbon is absent, life is also absent. Biochemistry supports our position. Biochemistry shows that carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, three combined, has to be present for life to exist. But instead of us learning about the function of carbon and iron, we've been fed vitamins, protein, enzymes, and melanin. But when the question is asked about these particular substances, that is very important. One of the most important questions that should be asked, are they electrical? People seem to think that this question should not have been asked. Shouldn't have been asked. Is it electrical? Well, science shows us that that question should be asked. Why? Because the human body is electrical. And any substance that would assimilate and render the good or nutrition that we are searching and pursuing, that substance must necessarily be electrical. And then, if it is electrical, it will have a definite amount of electrons per atom, separating one element or mineral from the other. You see, in nature, everything lives by its own kind, with its own kind. Remember, we talk about chemical affinity. So when we reconnect, we find that carbon is the determining factor. So this talk is the carbon papers. Science shows that without carbon, life is very, very poor or non-existent. And this is where the compounds of the USHA Research Institute comes into play. We carefully selected from the forest plants that are the highest in electrical vibration. And ladies and gentlemen, we said that God begins and ends with everything. This forces us and compels us to go to the Holy Bible. The Holy Bible teaches us in the book of Genesis that the herbs are for the healing of the nations. The book of Ezekiel 47:12 repeats the herbs are for the healing of the nations. We again go to the last book in the Holy Bible. The herbs are for the healing of the nations. So, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, God shows us in the first book, in the middle book, and in the last book, just in case that we overlook one, we will get it in the other. And if we miss the other, we get it in the last. So shouldn't the question be asked, are we willingly neglecting God and disobeying the mandate of God? Are we doing that willfully, knowing that this is one of the greatest violations? We talk about being obedient. Of course. It is obedience that gets us the things from the Almighty that we so desire. But how many of us are obedient to that dictate? Very few of us. I hope that I'm one of them. It says in the Bible that the herbs are for the healing of the nations. Should we go back into history a little bit and revisit Mr. Hippocrates, the father of medicine? We're not going to mention Imhotep I because there's problem with Imhotep. The reason why we say that there's problem with Imhotep I is because he was the first to open the human body. If the human body was made to be open, it would have a zip on it. It doesn't have a zip on it. It was not made to be open. But we are going to overlook Mr. Imhotep I from Egypt in the first dynasty. We're going to skip over this man and we're going to go to Hippocrates. And maybe Hippocrates would shed light on what we are now expounding on. Hippocrates lived 365 years before Christ was born. This man cured every disease known to man. Hippocrates did. Long before Jesus was born, he was healing every disease. So when we say that only Jesus heals, no, we should say that only God heals. Because Hippocrates was here 300 years before Christ was born. But Hippocrates, like Jesus Christ, was obedient to the dictates of God Almighty. Hippocrates cured every disease by using what? Herbs or chemicals. We find that Mr. Hippocrates didn't use any chemicals because there weren't any at that time. He used only herbs. And at the time of Hippocrates, there were no such thing as aloe vera, comfrey, peppermint. There was already garlic. That was made by the Egyptian. But we know that by the Egyptian history, that those people were a little bit confused because they were a product also of hybridization and cross-pollination, uneven yoke. History shows that the Egyptians were a crossbred of African, Persian, and Greek. That confuses things a little bit. You see, when things are complete, their molecular structure is complete and they function in accordance with life. But when you interfere and bring three different vibrations together, that in itself shows us there is confusion. So Mr. Hippocrates obeyed the laws of life and the dictates of God. He cured every disease. Now the question should be asked, if I'm a physician that went through the discipline and took the Hippocratic oath, well, if I took the Hippocratic oath, I am supposed to follow the precepts of Hippocrates. But why are we using chemicals today? Oh, that went by, and understandably so. All these violations in reference to healing and nutrition is occurring now. We're not eating electric food. We are eating things that were made by man in a laboratory. Since Mr. Hippocrates showed the world that the herbs really work, that particular modality or philosophy perspective continued until the year of 1729 by Mr. Claudio Galeno. He is considered to be the last of the natural scientists, and that is a fact. Since this man, Galeno, the Italian, what we find ourselves now using are chemicals that are inorganic and carcinogenic. So, ladies and gentlemen, what went wrong? What could have happened that caused us to disconnect? Why have we continued to practice such inconsistencies? Well, there is something that we just found out in the last 15 or 20 years. There is a substance that has been fed to our people in and out of Africa and probably around the world, because a seed in Asia, not only in Africa, a seed in South America. I saw it in Brazil, I saw it in Suriname, I saw it in Guyana, I saw it all through Central America. What we are talking about is cyanide. Cyanide have a tendency to interfere with brain waves, vibration, or hormonal message. Cyanide interfere with the hypothalamus. Cyanide interfere with the pituitary gland. Cyanide interfere with the central nerve system sufficiently, probably in one part of the body, and affecting a whole lot others, like garlic. Garlic is a substance that would definitely lower your pressure, because it would eat up the cholesterol in the arteries. But did it tell us that garlic, not only does it remove the plaque or the cholesterol, it eats the membrane, because garlic is unstable. It is another product that was made by man through the process of hybridization and cross-pollination. Garlic is a poison. Garlic has an oxide known as the oxide of allyl. This is why when you put garlic on a knife and you cut someone, the wound would never heal. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are bringing forth the questions. We are asking the questions that were not asked, probably because of fear or whatever reason. But it is time. Disease is running rampant. And at the Usha Research Institute, we feel that if we have accomplished all of these things, such as the cure for AIDS, sickle cell blindness, and others, then naturally we expect for the rest of the healers to converge on this particular modality or research. And it's not forthcoming, so humanity will suffer a little bit longer. So we want now for you to understand that we are separating that which is hybrid from that which is natural. Now we'll enter this other zone, a zone that was of most importance, yet our historian, our anthropologists, our archaeologists, our geneticists fail to bring forth and analyze and recognize, not to mention our ecclesiasticians. I could talk about my brother. My brother was a preacher for 30 years. He ate everything that God didn't make. And when he got sick, Pastor Gale took his body to the physicians. So we should ask the question, this man that preached the gospel for 30 years, once finding himself sick, elected and chose to turn his back on God and go to get a chemical that was made in a laboratory. We find that cyanide is so powerful. Cyanide would have you acting against yourself, not to mention the Creator. He has no place in life today. Because if the Creator had a place in our life today, as much as we would like for it to be, then most certainly we would not be drinking carrot juice and wheatgrass juice. We would not be eating a cow that was made by a laboratory. So there we find that violation is surmounting, right? A whole lot of it because of the cyanide. So we go back to the geneticists. Genetics plays a most important role. Why? Because when God made things, animals and plant, human beings, just name all species of living things. He placed the gorilla in Africa and the polar bear in Alaska. If you think that God made a mistake, all you have to do is to put each animal in the opposite environment that God made for it. Like the gorilla. Place him in Alaska. You will find that he would die with pneumonia in less than a fortnight. Place the polar bear in Africa. You would find that he would succumb to the heat. It's unbearable because his cells were not designed to live in an environment so hostile as the one in the Serengeti plain, which is hot. Likewise, the gorilla would say that the environment of the polar bear is hostile to his cellular structure. And what about the food of the gorilla? And the food of the polar bear? Where we find that the food of the gorilla are berries, plants, and leaves. Fruits. The diet of the polar bear, on the other hand, is flesh and blood. If we believe, like we always does, we believe in philosophy. We believe in everything, but we never know anything. We just don't know anything. We believe in a whole lot of things. Like I always say that I prefer to deliver myself to God than to believe in God because there is uncertainty. The polar bear eats blood. Not so for the gorilla. Eats plant. But now we look at the behavior of these two animals. We find that the gorilla is a very pleasant animal. He has no enemies in the forest. He raises his offspring just like we do. Just like we do, he raises his offspring. He's a pleasant animal. Not so for the polar bear. This animal eats blood. He has to kill to live. Because blood compels that animal to be vicious and savage, so he eats blood. We go to the birds. The eagle is a bird, so is a buzzard, and so is a hummingbird. That's a bird too. But the hummingbird, like the gorilla, he likes to indulge in the nectar of the plants. He have nothing to do with blood. He sucks the nectar from the plant. He's a very beautiful little bird. He's very gentle. Not so for the eagle. The eagle, on the other hand, eats blood, eats rats, eats snakes. But look at the disposition of the eagle and that of the polar bear, opposed to the hummingbird and the gorilla. We begin to see a biochemical interference. We apply that same example to the plants. Ladies and gentlemen, many of you that are acquainted with plants, like the burdock, the yellow dock, those are only two, the Virginia snake root. Those of you that are not acquainted with the plants in the tropics, the demagagua, the kalawala, the cypress, these are powerful plants. These plants are responsible for us at the Usha Research Institute reversing these pathologies or diseases. So you find that these plants also does not live in an environment that is inconsistent with their cellular and genetical structure. You will never find kalawala grown in Canada, nor cypress, nor demagagua. That you will never find. Like you will never find the burdock in Central America. Because these plants, the kalawala, the demagagua, and the cypress, are plant that grows in the tropical region of the planet. You will never find those plants in America. Likewise, you will never find yellow dock, burdock, or even the one shepherd purse in Central America, because the climatic condition is inconsistent with the existence of those plants. So as we take a very close look at plants and animals, we find that they have to obey a cosmic arrangement, a life procession that has maintained throughout creation. Does that apply? Chinese, Europeans. What are we ingesting? And whatever we are ingesting, did our archaeologists, paleontologists, historians, or Egyptologists, did they take time out to ask about the food that would maintain my hormones, my central nerve system in perfect working condition? No, they didn't ask these questions. This was never even thought of. They went on to tell us about Plato, the philosophers. Plato, Aristotle, Diogenes, as if though that matters. The archaeologists were telling us about the various fossils that was found in Egypt 10 million years ago. The others, the historian, they talk about what took place in Africa so many hundreds of thousands of years ago. But never did one say that he found. Could we dialogue and make sense? It's difficult today. Cyanide has played such an important role in detouring that thinking pattern. I know, I experienced that. So what we did, after understanding that these things were not forthcoming, we decided to travel the world, once arriving at the understanding that when God does things, it should be respected. We went to Africa, Central and South America. We find the tropical plants, we put them together, and this is what we found. That there is only one disease, and that was said for the first time to the Supreme Court of New York in 1988, that there is only one disease. That one disease that is afflicting us is the basis for all manifestations of pathology. The mucous membrane has been compromised. Compromised by what? By an acid substance. You see, our body are alkali. The food should be alkali. Being that it is alkali, it is acid-free and it is electrical. You will never find a battery that says acid battery. No. If the battery has energy, it is alkali. So at the Usha Research Institute, we took the painstaking task of compounding these products that you know today as natural vegetation cell food, which assimilates immediately. Natural vegetation cell food, which will nourish the body and render the electricity that the body really needs to maintain that vibration, that vibrance, that energy, that livelihood, that sight, that life quality. Now that we find ourselves at this juncture, what do? Well, like I said, it is our duty. It is not the duty of the European race, the Chinese, the Eskimo, the Indian people from India. That was our responsibility. So this is why we put together a food for the blood. We call it Maya. That is our trademark. In that Maya, you find many, many herbs that addresses the blood plasma. We also, in the same therapeutical package, we put together a compound for the bones. We call it Fucus. Fucus is a compound with sea moss and bladderwrack. That was put together proportionally balanced to strengthen the calcium cells. We put together another compound for the central nerve system. We know that the central nerve system depends on what? The central nerve system depends on copper and carbon. Why? Because the brain is copper and carbon. It produces electricity. If you were to visit an electrical plant, whether in Nevada or in your automobile, just open your generator. The piece of equipment in your car that produces the electricity that lights your whole dashboard and your headlights. When you open that generator, all you find is a copper wheel that is turning and some carbon brush rubbing against it. The friction of copper and carbon produces electricity. That I was able to extrapolate from Mr. Benjamin Banneker. It was then that I realized that for me to adequately, I find him in the Kinkeba in Africa. I find them also in the Marula. I find them in the Papa. This is what we put together recently, is the African formula. The African formula has a tendency to change your life in the matter of minutes because it addresses every part of you. The other compound that we put together is a salve. This is a salve that has addressed many, many skin problems. Pain in a matter of minutes. Headaches in seconds on the skin. Carpal tunnel syndrome is properly addressed in a matter of minutes. Iron fluorine, like we before mentioned, iron is one of the most important mineral on the planet. And the reason for that is that iron is the only magnetic mineral on the planet. It attracts every other mineral to it. So when you ingest iron, you are ingesting every other mineral on the planet, and they are 102. This is why when people come to us that are severely anemic, we recommend our iron, our natural vegetation cell food, which is iron fluorine. Not only does it revitalize the cells in the blood, but we should know this, that iron is what conveys oxygen to the brain, and oxygen is what the brain converts and uses for electricity. It is the food of the brain. So you see that there are many things that need to be unraveled because there seems to be such a gross misconception. They brought us protein, they brought us enzymes, they brought us vitamins, they brought us melanin. But we have yet to accommodate these things in our human biology. They tell us. But then I started thinking that I stopped eating protein 39 years ago. Vitamins, I stopped them likewise 39 years ago. Enzymes, well, I never knew what was enzymes. I know many people think that they know. But like everything else, like this Dr. Lionel Paulin, he brought us vitamin C. What is vitamin C? Oh, I know what the answer would be. Vitamin C is good for your immune system. It strengthens the immune system. Not so. Vitamin C is ascorbic acid. The body has no place for acidity. The body is alkali. So you see, in the carbon papers that we are presenting, we are unraveling much of the misconceptions. And this is why we are privileged today and for the past 28 years to address all these major diseases in the way, in the manner in which they should have been addressed. But then another thing shows up, is that today, unlike yesterday, there were more love among us. And then we ask ourselves the question, why is it that the love that we would like to manifest, you know, to feel warm when we see another human being, to give that human being our love, the best that we have to offer, that is not forthcoming, not only to our own selves. We have turned against ourselves. First, because of the cyanide that has confounded these neurons in the brain. Cyanide. The other is that we have been listening to philosophy instead of God. And in so doing, we neglect ourselves. Once we have neglected ourselves and deprived ourselves because of this intervention of cyanide and philosophy, we find that we too become confused, and then it is difficult for us to give the love that we should give ourselves to others. It's not forthcoming because cyanide is interfering. We are looking outside of ourselves for the answer. Of course we are. We were trained to look outside of ourselves, but the answer was always within. So, myself, I was raised as a Christian, and I became a Muslim. I learned from both religions. Unlike many, they found a need to criticize one or the other. I critically servant, Dr. Sebi.